All right, Ms. Dietrich, I think we should go ahead and get started. Yes?
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. For those of you who've joined us this evening, welcome. And for those of you who are watching and taking the opportunity to learn about specifically about Prop R, we are glad that you have taken the time to do so. And I want to make sure that as we get started this evening, that one of the things I know that there are many different ways and many different reasons that we might have members of our community engage with the school district. And tonight's Prop R is the subject of our Power Hour. And so we will limit that and the information that we're giving this evening to information specifically about Prop R and our progress on those projects and timelines moving forward. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for folks to ask questions in our chat if you want to take advantage of that opportunity. And if you have other items that you would in which you'd like to engage us, certainly you can reach us at the email address that will be on the final slide of our presentation. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce members of our cabinet. This is the senior leadership group of the Kirkwood School District, the group I have the privilege of working with most closely every day. And then we'll introduce the rest of our panel and get started on our really in the information that you're here to listen to. Always want to make sure that I take the opportunity to thank the Board of Education and thank our community, because had it not been for you and your votes, we would not be here talking about Prop R and the wonderful things and projects that we're going to be able to do for our schools on behalf of our students and our staff. So thank you very much for that overwhelming support that we received just last April. And we're moving pretty quickly. So again, members of our cabinet team, I'm going to start with our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and that's Dr. Matt Bailey.
Good evening, everybody.
All right, next is our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and that's Dr. Howard Fields.
Good evening, everyone.
All right, next is our Chief Communication Officer, Mrs. Steph Dietrich.
Hello.
And then let's see, as I go around, just make sure I got everybody. Finally, our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Mike Romay.
Good evening, everyone.
Right. Oh, I knew I was missing. You're right in the middle of my Brady Bunch there, Dr. Painter. I apologize for that. Did you see me looking all the way around? And I apologize. I do want to make sure that we introduce our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Brian Painter.
Hello, everyone.
Wow. So I'm going to share my screen. And we will get started on this. So our additional panelist joining us this evening is our Coordinator of Safety and Security, Mr. Marty Scott.
Good evening, everyone.
Our Director of Buildings, Mr. Russ Leary.
Hello.
Principal of Westchester Elementary, Dr. Bo Ricker.
Good evening, everyone.
And our Principal of Robinson Elementary, Dr. Angeline O'Neill-Hograve.
Hi, everybody.
So just a quick overview for everybody about Prop R. If you'll recall that Prop R was passed in April with the specific goal of meeting our needs of our current overcrowded schools and what we expect to be a fairly modest growth of about 3 to 5% over the next 5 years. And it will provide additional classrooms, security upgrades, and accessibility improvements at our schools. And as I said, to really address the overcrowding that we were already seeing, and then make sure that we have space and make room for the growth that we expect over the next 5 years. So I'm not going to spend any more time talking about that. Again, if you're engaged, you know that passed and you know what our message was surrounding that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Romay to talk a little bit about the timeline since Prop R's passage.
Thank you. So as Dr. Ulrich mentioned, that Prop R passed in April, that the election day was April 6th. It received overwhelming support. 68% of our community passed, voted yes for Prop R. In May of 21 is when we sold the bonds. We sold them through a competitive sale, And what that means is we solicited bids for interest rates on the bonds. And so the financial institution that quoted us the lowest interest rate is the bank that we sold the bonds to. And then from there, they sell it out to put it on the market for sale to the general public. The interest rate that we received for the bonds was 1.4%. It was an average of 1.4%. So we were really pleased with that low interest rate. Then also in May is when we hired the professional services for Prop R. We hired 3 architectural firms, HTK, Bond Architects, and Arc Images. We hired 3 different firms really because of the scope of work that we have to have done and the relatively short timeline. So we wanted to split the projects up between 3 different firms. We also hired a construction management firm called Navigate Building Solutions. They are a construction management firm that serves as our agent. So they work on behalf of the Kirkwood School District to oversee the entire construction process. So starting with the design, so they work closely with our team and the architects, but they also facilitate the bidding process, and then they oversee the actual construction of the project. They're experts in this field, so it's critical that we have somebody like Navigate working on our side as an agent of the school district. And whenever we go through the construction process, we follow a bid process. This is with all construction work that we do, all major purchases that we do. It's through a competitive bidding process. It requires that we advertise the project. So we advertise the projects in the newspaper. We post it on our district website. We also post it in the different construction plan rooms throughout the area. And we also email it to different contractors. And then we collect sealed bids. And then from there, we go through the bids with the help of our team. And then we make a recommendation to the Board of Education. And the Board of Education, they will award the bid to the lowest qualified bidder in a public meeting. And so we've already begun the process of some of the projects. There is several smaller projects that we're able to start and complete this summer. That includes HVAC upgrades at the schools that are listed on the screen: Kirkwood High School, Kaiser, North Glendale, and Tillman. That was part of Prop R, is that we were going to make improvements to our HVAC systems. Most of our units that are on our buildings were installed in the 90s, so they're 25 to 30 years old. And so we've been upgrading them throughout the last several years. But this is a way to kind of get caught up, is to use some of the Prop R dollars to catch up on that work. We also were able to create a secured entrance or vestibule at North Glendale. That was the last school that we have in our school district that didn't have a secured entrance that prevents visitors from walking directly into the school once they're buzzed in through the front doors. So that's a very good improvement that we were able to make. And then lastly, we created a new security office at Kirkwood High School on the Essex side of campus. We're going to create a new main office on the Doherty Ferry side. That won't be finished until the summer of 2023. But this is a security office on the Essex side that will give us more visibility on that side of the campus. And next, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, Russ Leary, is going to talk about our HVAC units.
Thank you, Mr. Romay. Just to add on to what you were saying, it's correct. We hit 4 schools. We started in late May with the HVAC projects on the Prop R. We replaced a total of 38 units, including air handlers, condensers, split systems, packaged rooftop units. 27 units were at, 3 units at Kirkwood High School. We have more to go. We had 2 units at Kaiser, North Glendale had 4 units, Tillman had 2. These affected 107 classrooms, one library, one gymnasium. It benefited all those schools with these new equipments that we have, the new building automation systems, new package rooftop units, new air handling units, new work platforms, new safety platforms, new roof hydrants. We're about 98% complete with those Prop R units right now. We're in the training and the commissioning phase of the projects right now. Well, commissioning is just about done. So we're very close to wrapping up those particular 4 schools and the HVAC units that we've installed there.
And next, Martise Scott, our Director of Safety and Security, will talk about our secured entrances and security office.
Once again, good evening, everyone. As Mr. Romay indicated, we've secured our vestibule and entrance into the main office at North Glendale. And as you can see on the photographs, there's no direct entry into the office anymore, which we're very excited about. It can now hold visitors in a bit of a holding pattern and not releasing them into the building. As you look to the right of the screen, you'll see that is the entrance off of Essex, 801 Essex. We now have a secure vestibule in place there, as well as a little bit more visibility from the window that you see to the right. That window gives access to the Essex parking lot, as well as the entry, so visible to myself or my staff if anyone is entering the walkway or if there may be an issue in the parking lot. As you look further to the right, you'll notice the interior of the office. They did an excellent job in putting this together. As you can see, there's a window that leads out to the office area, which my office is behind that open door. So once anyone were to enter into the building, that is a stopping point to be checked in by my secretary and then released to another door that leads to the inside of the building. So we feel very good about this. We're glad to have it. And like Mr. Romay indicated, 2023 will then move the new main office to the edge of campus, which is great. And we remove having anyone having to walk through the middle of campus. So we're very excited about it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Martise and Russ. We very much appreciate that. Appreciate your expertise in making sure that these projects are done and done well. We're very excited about these projects that are already done. That's a pretty good track record so far in making sure that that we are hitting our marks and doing things in a timely manner. And so I want to make sure I take the opportunity before I talk about things that are already done or already in the works, just make sure I take the opportunity to thank the Board of Education. The Board of Education has embraced the idea of transparency surrounding the Prop R process. And they also have understood and taken really great strides to make sure that we can do these things in a timely manner. And that includes meeting on times that are not our regularly scheduled meetings. We are making sure that our public is aware of when those meetings are occurring. But very often, as Mr. Romay will tell you, very often our architects and the folks that help us with those types of projects and our contractors don't always work on a regular, what we would call a normal Board of Education schedule. And so our Board of Education has shown a great, really just a great willingness to schedule meetings outside of those normal meetings. And we do publicize those just like we do any other board meeting. So if you'd like to sit in on those, please make sure that you're subscribing to, liking, or otherwise following our social media, and you will be informed of any time that we are meeting specifically with regard to Prop R matters. And so at this time, we have some projects that we're working on right now. We have some ADA ramps at the front of North Glendale and Robinson Elementary. And then we have two classroom addition that's going on at Westchester Elementary, which is just phase one of our Westchester construction. And so I know we've got you here, Dr. O. If you want to talk a little bit about the future impact of the ADA ramp at Robinson.
Sure. We are super excited to see the work going on at Robinson and our front entrance. So before Prop R had passed, we had multiple ramps at different areas around our building to allow access to our students and families with limited mobility. With Prop R passing, it is now a ramp in our front entrance. It's almost finished. All we have left to do is add our handrails over on the sides. And then we also have to add our chairlift on our interior of our building so that families and students can access our main hallway as well as our front offices. And this is so important to us because we want to make sure that all families and students feel welcome and are able to come in and be accessible from our front entrance and not have to go around to any other side. So we're almost done and it's looking really good.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. O. We greatly appreciate that. And Dr. Ricker, you want to talk a little bit about the two additional classrooms that we've already started. You can see on your screen there that we had our groundbreaking just a couple of weeks ago, and that work is underway. So if you want to talk a little bit about the impact that will have, and again, specifically why we had to accelerate these two classrooms a bit.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we have two classrooms going in the front of the building in the green area, down at the diagram. Currently, they've got the footings poured and they'll be pouring the flat work this week. Those two spaces will alleviate a lot of the pressure that we have in our building because we still have art and music on a cart. So they do not have a design location. They are traveling to each classroom. So those two teachers will now have a dedicated space for this first phase of construction. It's a little over 2,000 square feet that we're adding on this first phase. It's progressing well. The weather has cooperated. We're very happy about that. The kids are eager to see the progress. I get asked daily, what's behind that big fence and what's back there? We actually have two students that are going to be principal and assistant principal for a half day later in November and are going to join us in a construction meeting. So they'll be the first two students to kind of see what's behind the curtain, so to speak. So they're very eager and excited about that. But getting that completed before the end of the school year will alleviate a lot of pressure of walking to and from and giving the art room to be able to have the opportunity to paint again or do pottery because they don't have space to store those things right now because they're traveling to each classroom. So it opens up space, but also opens up curricular opportunities for all of our kids. So it's greatly needed. We're very happy that Prop R passed, and we look forward to the addition being completed sometime by the end of this school year.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ricker. And Mr. Romay, if you would like to cover the timeline for our remaining projects.
Sure. This winter, we'll be putting out to bid the rest of the project. So that includes the major additions that we're going to build for the high school, the two middle schools, Tillman and Westchester. But it also includes some interior renovation that we're going to do at Kaiser Robinson, North Glendale, and then at KCC. And this is just schools that are listed, but we're also making improvements at our warehouse. And so we'll be putting that out to bid as well. So all the bids will be issued this winter. We'll bring it back to, as I mentioned before, we'll bring those bids back to our Board of Education for approval. And so those approvals will take place in the last round of approval should be in February. All the work will start in the spring. That includes the major additions at high school, Nifer, North, Tillman, and Westchester, the second phase of Westchester. So that work will start this spring. Those are major additions. They won't be completed until the following year, the summer of 23. The more minor interior renovation work that we're going to do at Robinson, Kaiser, North Glendale, and KCC, that work, since it's interior work, that won't start until the summer, but it'll start in the summer and be completed before school starts in August of 2022. And then also North Middle, if you're familiar with that project, we're converting ASC back into classrooms. So that's really most of the work that is going to happen at North Middle is interior work. So that work will go faster than the building additions. So that should be completed in late summer, late August for North Middle. It does include a connection corridor in the front. It's going to connect the two wings of the schools. But that's the only outside construction that will take place at North Middle. Also, this fall of 2022 is when we expect to have the security and exterior lighting improvements completed. So we're planning on upgrading our cameras and adding cameras at all of our schools and also improving the exterior lighting. And then, as I had mentioned, the major building additions for high school, Knifer, Tillman, and Westchester, those will take roughly about 14 to 16 months to complete. So they'll be finished in the summer of 23.
So at this time, I want to make sure that we're very open and transparent about the process for the completion of Prop R projects. And we have a lot of moving parts. Again, as Mr. Romay would always remind us, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of people involved to make these projects happen for our students and our staff. As you saw in the previous couple of slides, we've given a rough time frame. These are the time frames that we are hoping to stay on schedule and meet, so we can have our spaces, all of our spaces, ready for our students to occupy no later than August of 2023. We are going to work on that. However, there are some things that, as you know, if you pay attention to anything in the national news, that we want to make sure that we do everything and come in under budget and spend the money wisely, effectively, and efficiently. We want to make sure we meet those timeframes that we have published. But again, as you know, if you followed along, you know that there's been an increase in construction prices, an increase in labor costs, and certainly a disruption in our supply chain that has been widely publicized. And so all of those things will come into play as we try and hit our marks throughout this process. And so we will do everything we can to be creative in our solutions. But ultimately, our goal is to keep our promise to our taxpayers and you, the folks who voted to support this, and the work that we did to get ready for this proposition to pass. And so, Mr. Romay, is there anything else that you kind of want to add from your expertise, having kind of gone through this process in the past? Anything the folks who are viewing this should know?
I would just add that we do have, as I mentioned earlier, a construction management firm that is helping us. So they're keeping a close eye on these supply chain issues and the budget and the time frame. So they are experts in this field, and that's why it's so critical to have them on board. And they are really going to keep us on track. We do have contingencies, a contingency budget planned. We carry a contingency with any construction work that we do. And so that we're hopeful that that the contingency will cover any particular supply chain costs or escalated costs related to that. But again, the fact that we have a construction management team on board is really going to be helpful as we navigate these challenges.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Romay, and thank you very much to all of those folks that have joined us. And now at this time, we'll turn it over to any questions. As I have kind of clicked here, I do see one question at this point that's in the chat. And Dr. Bailey, this is related to the work that Prop R is doing. We have Sarah has asked if we could get an update on the Tillman Split. And that, of course, is related to the boundary adjustment work that we were very open about communicating in terms of what we would do. If you want to, for all the rest of the folks that might be viewing, if you want to explain the Tillman Split, Dr. Bailey, and then where are we with our boundary adjustment? What does our timeline look like? Specifically, when would we bring new boundary maps to the board for approval?
Certainly. First, let me make sure that everyone understands what the Tillman Split is, and good evening, everyone. we have 5 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. And so our boundaries are currently set up so that 4 of those elementary schools each feed a specific middle school. So Kaiser and Westchester both feed North Kirkwood Middle currently, and Robinson and Glendale both feed NIFER currently. Tillman has been split, meaning that half the kids, or not always half, but that the students that are in 5th grade will either go to North Kirkwood Middle or to NIFER, depending on where they live and reside within their Tillman boundary. It's something that came up quite frequently when we were having our boundary adjustment committee meetings. It's something that I know that even many of us were unaware that students start discussing this Tillman split even as far back as kindergarten and start forming some friendships and social groups for students that they know that they'll be in middle school with. So as part of a commitment that we made regarding Prop R, we really wanted to take a look at what ways we could address the Tillman split to make sure that the students are all attending the same middle school. And one of the creative things that we looked at really involves, again, looking at our capacity. And it's one reason why Tillman was kind of selected, along with a very large lot size, selected to have many of those additions so that we could start looking at what boundary options we have in terms of students from maybe 2 of the larger elementary schools going to 1 middle school and 3 of the others going to the other. However, none of that is firmly set just yet. But we are right now in the process of finalizing some of the consulting agreements and different contracts with the consulting firm. We've gotten lots and lots of feedback and community input on our boundary adjustments, lots of different things. It's something that we have not done for over 40 years. And our boundaries right now, some of them are a little wonky. We've got students that live right next to NIFER Middle School, for example, that will attend North Kirkwood Middle, and students that live in our Meacham Park area that actually attend both Robinson and Westchester in some cases, depending on which side of the street they live on. And so we have students that travel across the district in some areas. So kind of an update on the Tillman split and just an overarching piece of where our maps are at. We're in the process of finalizing those agreements, and then we'll start looking at the map options. We've also got enrollment projections that are coming for future years using something that's called census block numbers and projections. And without getting into too deep into the math, basically it's looking at chunks of houses in the area and how those areas could grow in population. And so we will be probably after the winter break at some point starting to look at some of those maps and having opportunities for feedback and what those could look like. But we are not planning on bringing anything to the school board until probably next summer. We want to make sure we're very intentional and deliberate about the process and get lots of community feedback. I do want to highlight and emphasize again for several of our families, we do have an exception process that we'll put into place, meaning if you are starting at a school, we'll let you finish at that school. Regardless of if you are zoned to change schools, we'll let your family finish out. So we're going to have kind of a long transition period as families are moving into kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and being able to finish in those buildings. None of this will go into place until all of the construction is finished, which Mr. Romay highlighted would not be until the 23-24 school year. And so we do have a couple years, but we want to get this out to our families. So we've looked at potentially August of 2022 at having some finalized maps approved by our school board and Board of Education. And I do want to emphasize again at the end that our Board of Education is the governing body that would approve any of those boundary maps, but we will continually seek feedback up until that point that the board is voting, lots of moving parts in that. So I hate to say the update is we're still in progress with everything. We won't have anything until probably next summer, but just know that it is a commitment that we've made to really address the Tillman split.
Right. And just in a related note for you, Sarah, in answering that question, Prop R passing is the thing that's allowing us to even have the conversation about addressing the Tillman split. So thank you for that question. Another question, or just another point of emphasis I would have, Mr. Romay, if you would please, would you talk a little bit about the historically low interest rate that the district did get? And what does that mean for us in terms of directing dollars, our community's dollars? What does that mean to directing those to our schools?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We were, as I had mentioned earlier, we were really pleased with the interest rate. When we initially started planning for Prop R, we thought it was going to be even higher than that. But as you know, that with the probably related to the pandemic, rates continued to drop throughout that process. and we put it out to bid, and the rate was 1.4%. So that saves our taxpayers a lot of money. It allows us to pay off the bonds much faster. And so we'll be able to pay off these bonds in 13 years. So that's great news for the school district and our community. But it's that rate is the lowest that we've ever seen. We thought we had pretty good rates when we issued bonds back in 2010. But those rates average around 3 to 4%. And so this really is, we kept mentioning all throughout Prop R when we were putting information out that it was historically low rates. And that is true. We've never paid rates that low. So it's a win for the school district and for our community. And like I had said, we're able to pay off the bonds much faster because of it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know, Dr. Ricker, you were able to talk about additional classrooms at Westchester, and will the boundary work that we will do, obviously, will certainly make those boundaries and to fit those students that will go to Westchester. I know, Dr. O, related to that, as the principal at Robinson, that's not adding classes, would you talk a little bit about what it will mean for what this additional capacity at Tillman and Westchester will mean for a school like Robinson that is pretty full? What will that mean when the Prop R projects are done?
Yes, I would agree. We're pretty full. So for us, that will mean currently we have teachers teaching in some very small spaces. I am new at Robinson, but I would guess that those spaces did not and were not intended to be classroom spaces. And so it will mean that they will go back to some bigger classroom spaces. Robinson has had some really nice additions. And so some of those people in those smaller spaces will be able to move to some of the newer classroom spaces that have been designed with some of the previous additions. And so for us, it will be a little breathing room, a little room to stretch, and all of our teachers feeling like they have the space that they need to meet all of our students' needs.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Scott, one thing that I want to make sure that we emphasize, because we talked about security at the high school. You mentioned the Doherty Ferry side, the work that will go on as part of our big addition there. If you would just kind of, for our folks that maybe don't have direct experience with our high school, or maybe have high schoolers coming up, talk a little bit about the unique challenges of the Kirkwood High School's campus. It's a beautiful campus, very unique for our part of the country. It's a very what I would call kind of a desert Southwest type of campus, where there's a lot of open spaces. Talk a little bit about the specific challenges that we're looking to address with our Prop R projects.
Well, like you've indicated, thank you, Dr. Ulrich. We're sitting on 40 plus acres at Kirkwood High School. And the uniqueness is not necessarily from a safety and security point. We have our main office, which is in the middle of campus, which means that anyone visiting would have to walk to the middle of campus from either direction in order to get to the main office, which puts quite a few folks on the campus that we don't necessarily want wandering about. So with the new addition of Doherty Ferry, and with the addition of the Essex, we can kind of control entry points into the high school. So that's so important, especially as Dr. Ulrich indicated, we've got this kind of Southwest California look also that allows you to just wander through the campus. And folks do wonder because it's a beautiful campus. But from a safety perspective, I think with the addition of the Doherty Ferry side, we can help enclose some things in a nice fashion without becoming what I consider a gated community without closing everything in.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ricker, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about one of the things that we have made a commitment to, because Westchester and Tillman will be a little bit bigger than our other three sister elementary schools. Would you talk a little bit about our commitment to make sure that we have really equitable access to resources, things like music and art. Our parents who might have students who would attend maybe what we would call our bigger elementary schools. Can you talk about the additions at Westchester and how we are fulfilling that commitment to make sure that we have equitable access to those things?
Yes, absolutely. So with the second phase of construction at Westchester, we will be adding additional classrooms, and we'll have 2 art room areas for art and 2 areas for music. So if we do gain some more students and we have to hire additional staff members, we will have adequate space for those staff members. It's also really important that we have our reach and our talented and gifted program that will have an adequate space, so classroom space to be able to use, as well as our special education students, the students that qualify through special school districts. So we will be able to have spaces that are large enough to accommodate all types of students, whether they're coming to us from a different range of needs, from if they're a gifted student or if they're a student that needs any type of intervention or even some special education instruction. We will have adequate space, including the kids that we may get when they redo the boundaries. So we will have adequate space to be able to provide quality education, personalized learning for each kid that will be attending Westchester. We've been cramped for a while. I mean, when I started 6 years ago, we were at 423 students, and I think when I left today, it was near 581. So we've grown quite a bit, and we will have, once this project's over, we will have room to grow with our community and be able to provide personalized learning with adequate space for every student that enters Westchester.
All right, well, thank you very much. And then finally, Ms. Dietrich, one of the things from your office, would you let our folks who are watching either live with us or maybe who've taken the opportunity to view this as a recording, what can our public expect with regard to communications? Again, our board approved a strategic plan this summer. One of our guiding principles is transparency. And a lot of that falls to the work of you and your office and your team. What can our public expect from you in terms of communication about these projects moving forward?
Well, certainly events like the one taking place this evening are a big part of that. We want to continue to keep the public up to date on what is going on as we move through these projects and as we get through the time where we're in construction. Events like these are an action item on our strategic plan to do these in a regular fashion. We also want to celebrate our accomplishments by having groundbreakings when we have major construction projects, and celebrating when we are complete by having ribbon cuttings at those projects where we can celebrate and cut a ribbon and let the public know when we've met our promises to our taxpayers. So we'll continue to do that. And then also we'll put information out in all of the different modes that we typically communicate with, whether that be social media or the postcard that goes out to our community, to let folks know what projects are underway, what projects have been completed, and how it is that we are doing the many things that Prop R is allowing us to accomplish.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you again, everybody, all the panelists that have joined us this evening. And then one last time, I just want to make sure that I thank you as a taxpayer and a voter and as a patron in our district. We could not have this Power Hour. We could not have these wonderful projects that we are working on without the support that you have provided. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.